Alright, so hopefully we understand that if you want to reach a rating of 2000 and beyond, apart from like not being a London system player, there's more that goes into it than just sort of, picking the right opening. However, in my opinion, that being said, having a good opening, especially with white, definitely helps. And in today's video, I want to go over one of the openings that, at least in my opinion, is one of the most powerful openings that you can use to reach this level of 2000, and is personally one of the openings I have been using for almost 7 years at this point now. But that being said, this opening is the Catalan, and there are a few different ways you can get to this sort of position. There are also a few different setups that black can play, but against almost any setup that black can throw at you, you can still establish this sort of Catalan formation where you go for d4, c4, and you go for a kingside fianchetto. This combination of playing in the Queen's Gambit-like fashion with putting direct pressure on their center, along with having the light squared bishop on this long diagonal, create a very solid foundation for being able to, in the long term, strategically outplay your opponent. But there are a few different ways to get to this position, and what you'll see in a lot of Grandmaster games is maybe something like d4, d5, and you go for c4, then knight f3, g3. However, there are some cons of this move order. For example, in this position, there are many different lines black can play with bishop b4 check, and especially d takes c4 is quite annoying when this is what we call the open Catalan, and there are like 10 different moves that black can play just in this very position, which is why in this video I'm going to recommend for you guys, and what I will also play in the games, to play this move order where you go for d4, and let's say they play d5, you go knight f3, and then g3, delaying the c4 move, still giving white many of the Catalan positions that they would be otherwise familiar with, but at the same time we are also cutting out a lot of tricky stuff that black can throw against more conventional move orders where we go for c4 on move 2. That being said, I don't want to waste any more time. Let's get right into the first game. Alrighty, let me just check. This is all good and we are off. So yeah, we're going to be trying to get a Catalan on the board. d4, knight f6, knight f3. Yeah, I think this is probably the easiest move order to use to start off with, because d4, c4, if you go c4 very quickly, you will allow a lot of different stuff. But okay, we see c5, we're just gonna continue developing. If they take, we're gonna take back. They could also go d5 or knight c6, of course. But okay, yeah, taking makes a lot of sense, and we need to be a little bit careful because what we have essentially given our opponent after takes knight takes d4 is a position, right, where they do have this central pawn majority, and if we're not careful, it could potentially sort of run loose and dominate the center, right? But okay, knight c6 is not so critical. The best move is d5, and then we're trying to go for e5 very quickly. This we can play either c4 or castles, but let's just castle. We're not too concerned about them taking, because then we just take back and our queen comes into the center and is sort of allowed to run loose. Okay, d5 though. And one of the drawbacks of going knight c6 and then d5, or d5 then knight c6, is that now when we play c4, right, they can't really push e5 as easily because our knight before would have to like retreat somewhere, but now because there's a knight in c6, we can simply take, and they have some reverse Grunfeld actually, which is a tempo down on the normal reverse Grunfeld. Usually in the reverse Grunfeld, it's like, say like d5, g3, c5, bishop g2 takes, and then you try to go for e5 there, but notice how they haven't yet pushed the e-pawn. But here they're a tempo down on that actually if they went e5 here, because they've already pushed the e-pawn one square forward. But okay, bishop to c5. So here we have two options. We can take, or we could go for bishop b3 and play it like that. I'm gonna go, sorry, did I say bishop b3? I meant knight to b3. I'm probably thinking how I'm attacking the bishop, but yeah, we can just simply attack this and then they're forced to move somewhere. Yeah, bishop b6 is quite sensible. Bishop e7 makes a fair bit of sense as well. Let's say bishop e7. Bishop to b6 as well. Potentially we can think about c5, but I'm not a big fan of that because I feel like they sort of get bishop c7 and then like it's not entirely clear like why we've pushed c5. We've released a lot of the pressure on the center, but okay, they go bishop d6. Still c5 is an option with tempo, but yeah, I'm not a big fan. So we could take, that's as well an option we need to consider. And actually it's interesting in this position because after takes, I guess we could even win a pawn, but I'm not too fond of that because after takes, we've given up our light squared bishop, and potentially black can go like bishop h3. They can maybe even consider h5, h4 because they haven't castled yet. But even if they just played bishop e6 and castles, long term they have a lot of compensation because we've given up like a very important defender of our king side. But I think actually they'd probably take the knight first. I have like a hair that's like really bothering me on my face, but okay. Yeah, anyways, so c takes d5. I feel like e takes d5 first is probably something we're quite happy to see, because then we just go knight c3, continue pressuring the pawn. I feel like we're quite happy. But if like they take the knight, then they don't concede the IQP. And then, like, for example, if we tried to develop our knight to the square we want to, then they'd take and they then give us an isolated c-pawn, which means we might have to play something like, I don't know, e4, but I don't really want to shut in my bishop just yet. So ideally, I feel like the move I want to play is maybe like knight to c3, but then we have to calculate d takes c4, because obviously if they don't play this, there's a good chance we'll just take and maybe win a pawn. But after d takes c4, we need to then like calculate some stuff, right? Like knight d2 is sort of what I'm looking at, and to be honest, it looks quite nice. I don't see an easy way they can stop us from taking back the pawn. If they play b5, then their knight hangs. If they play knight to e5, I don't think we want to play queen a4 check, because I think that is sort of annoying bishop d7 with tempo. But I think if we reverse the order here, you might like to pause and take a think how we'll do this. But if knight c3 takes knight d2, knight e5, if we take first on c4, then take queen a4 check, then when like they play bishop d7, right, we're ready to take back on c4 immediately because their knight's hanging, and I don't think there's anything else they can really do. So I'm going to play knight to c3. I think this works out well. And if they don't stop us from taking on c4, we have what I would describe very much as a dream Catalan, where our bishop is just cruising along this diagonal, and yeah, I don't really see like a clear equalizing path for them. So they do take knight d2 is the plan, and yeah, what are they gonna do? Because knight to e5, we're gonna definitely just take that, as we were talking about. b5 not possible, it hangs this, and if they just castle, knight takes c4, and we have a very clear sort of just positional advantage because our pieces are more active, as is very typical in many Catalan positions. So yeah, what are they going to do? Not so sure. Let's wait and see. Okay, so he ends up going for knight to e5, but as we've discussed, we can take. I'm not a big fan of f4, because then like they can probably give a check, king h1, knight g4, and then by the time we take this, or maybe that doesn't even work though, because maybe rook takes f2, queen takes f2 and takes. But yeah, to be honest, it feels just unnecessarily weakening, this whole like f4 thing. I'd rather not, to be honest. So we're just going to take as we planned. Knight takes d4. Queen a4 again is the idea, and we win back the knight, and like we're just more active in that position. Maybe it's not as good as, say, like okay, so we should play that immediately, and we're not going to pre-move queen takes d4 in case they're a cheeky bastard and play b5. But yeah, this should be pretty nice. Rook c8, queen b3, rook d1. This, I think we have a nice position. I guess the one thing maybe is here that like if queen b3, bishop c6, they might trade off the light squared bishops, but we're going to play queen to b3, and we're going to make sure that if they're able to do so, it's going to be under circumstances that are not ideal. And what I mean by that is when they play bishop to c6 and this position takes, they can't take back the rook and keep like a queen pawn structure, because then we have queen takes b7. So if they want to play bishop to c6 here, they're going to have to make a concession in the form of taking on this isolated c-pawn. And okay, in this position we give up our light squared bishop, but we have a nice positional advantage that we can play against long term. We continue developing maybe and play some sort of combination of moves like that maybe, and eventually put pressure against this pawn. And okay, is it like completely winning? No, but it's something that is definitely still well, it's not nothing, and it's very nice. Queen to c7 though, really? Like, can we not play knight to b5? Because that's an annoying fork, and if they just take it, that's the bishop here. And if they, well, take it, we still get the bishop here. And we're probably even winning the pawn there. So knight to b5, unless there's some trap I'm not seeing, I think that's a pretty good move. So, yeah, I don't know what he's seen. But yeah, looks like a pretty good position if you ask me. And let me just check something. Yep, okay, all good. I'm getting paranoid sometimes that like halfway through recording, like the screen's not properly recording or something. But okay, queen takes b5, check. And here, like at the very least, I think if they block somehow, we can probably win a pawn. And yeah, game is going pretty well so far. Nothing too special we've done. A little bit of calculation earlier on, but yeah, pretty straightforward. So now we can take either one of these ways. I don't know which is best, but maybe we should just take the queen to ensure we get the game. Let's take, and not only we up a pawn, but we have the bishop here as well. So like, yeah, this is gonna be pretty trivial, I think, to convert from here. We just bring the bishop back. We could maybe pin them as well, actually. I was thinking rook c7 was what they were gonna play, but we could probably put them in a bit of a pin there as well, I guess. And king to e7 is sort of what I assume they would play, but then maybe they're going to start kicking our bishop around. And I don't really want to trade this for the knight, like sure we could do that, but I think keeping the bishop pair on is more valuable, so that's what I'm going to do. If they go bishop to e5, we're just going to tuck out of there and unravel with rook b1, b3 eventually, and then they don't really have any ideas. So yeah, so far surprisingly easy game. This guy has like close to 2200 rapid rating on Lichess. I know there's going to be a bunch of people in the comments saying Lichess is inflated and stuff like that, but I think at a certain, I think that's true actually, but I think when you get to a certain point, I've talked about this to a few other people, but like when you get to like let's say, okay, so actually first of all we need to stop talking and figure out how do we meet the c2, because rook c2 is kind of annoying actually. Maybe we just go bishop e4, bishop d3. Yeah, if we do that, like, okay, hold up. I've got some interesting ideas. So, if, I'm also thinking, like, okay, so with bishop e4, I'm kind of annoyed by knight c5, but I'm thinking, like, we'll come back to the Lichess round later, but for now, like, rook d1, I'm thinking, perhaps maybe we can, like, allow them to take even, but the idea is maybe we come in and sort of try to trap the rook almost with like some bishop d3 stuff. They can come out to e5. Yeah, it's a little bit tricky. Actually, wait, so if like, I guess we could also just go like king f1 maybe as well and protect this pawn like that. And if they then try to go bishop e5, then I think we get bishop e4. We kick the rook out and then we can sort of go from there. So let's go rook d1 actually. But yeah, about what I was saying about Lichess and chess.com ratings. Not that it's super relevant to this video, I guess, but like, I don't know. I mean, I have ratings on both sides. Like, I have private accounts other than the ones I use publicly. And yeah, from my private, and I actually haven't played that extensively on chess.com. And I also mainly play 3-2 on Lichess and like 3-0 on chess.com. But okay, so we're gonna go king f1, protect this, and prepare bishop e4. But yeah, from what I've sort of found, I guess also maybe, okay, so I think if knight c5, then rook d2, and we exchange off rooks like that would be sort of the idea to go for, because I don't want to play b4. Like, that's not only not threatening anything because like there's a pin, but I mean it's just also very weakening. They can even take a2. But okay, now I think bishop e4 is quite reasonable. We can think about that. I mean, we can also play rook d2, but then if they retreat, it's sort of some awkward coordination, I feel like. So we're gonna go bishop e4 for now. But yeah, I feel like up until a certain point, like, okay, sure, Lichess is maybe a bit inflated, but like once you get like above 2200, it's kind of the same-ish. But I guess at the very higher end, then maybe that's where chess.com starts to not be as inflated, because I feel like a lot of the like really the top players, they mostly play on chess.com as opposed to Lichess, whereas on Lichess you can have like people 3000 who are like FIDE master, which on chess.com that is not as common. But okay, rook to c5. So now we're sort of consolidated. We've prevented a lot of their counterplay, and now we should be seeking to further probably get this bishop in the game somehow, I'm thinking. So how do we do this? So again, b4 I'm not a big fan. Probably rook c4 is an annoying fork. Can I just play bishop to e3, rook a5, and maybe a3? I can also just go bishop d2, to be honest. Like, I don't exactly see an issue with that. I can put the bishop here, but somehow I kind of like the bishop on this diagonal a bit more. But I guess from here it's also protecting this, which is kind of nice, and maybe I prevent more counterplay. And I guess it's difficult for him to activate the knight here. This bishop b4. Probably, to be honest, either of them works. I probably shouldn't burn too much time, but I guess if bishop here, he does get bishop to e5 maybe. So let's just go, I'm thinking now here, bishop e5. I know I said I should move quickly, but this isn't simple. Okay, let's just go bishop d2. I just want to restrict his counterplay. We have 2 minutes, but there's a 5-second increment, so I'm not super concerned about him flagging bishop e5. Probably what I would expect. If not, then like I think I just put my bishop here probably, and I'm sort of chilling. Oh, I wasn't expecting that. That seems quite weakening. Unless he's going knight to e5 or something very specific he has in mind. But yeah, that wasn't exactly the first thing I thought that came to mind. Also, bishop g5, is that an issue? He's forced to go knight f6 then. And I think that's probably not ideal. So let's go here, because if you go anywhere else, I get rook takes d6. So I could also consider taking, but I don't really want to, again, trade off my bishop here and then get this position with opposite colored bishops. I feel like that'd be a lot harder to sort of grind down. It's knight f6, probably what I would expect, and then I can either play this or this, but I want to play, really? What's the idea of that? Can't I just take, and then your knight's hanging? Okay, I don't know what this guy's doing, but I think that that's pretty much just accelerating his demise. Maybe he didn't see knight f6 was legal, I'm not sure. But yeah, that's not good. So yeah, pretty much every single possible turn our opponent has made our life exponentially easier. Okay, and they resign. Okay, I'm gonna put in the analysis board. I'll just check that that's fitting all right there. Okay, it should be. Yeah. So c5. Yeah, if they go for d5, right, and they go for like this, there's a good chance like we'll get some sort of like truly like Catalan on the board, and then they can go for some sort of delayed open Catalan or closed Catalan c6. Like if you want to learn about the closed Catalan, this is in plenty of my other videos. But okay, in this game they decided to go for c5, which is we'll check the database. I think it's one of the most common responses here. Okay, this is masters. What's our filter? Okay, so like let's put in this maybe, and it's the third most common response. So d5 is most common, but yeah, I mean it's a very logical move attacking this. But as I mentioned, right, it's best to go d5 and then like for a very quick e5, and you can see it doesn't score so well. I think that's because a lot of white players just haven't studied this so well, but if you know what you're doing, it's definitely playable. You can also go for c4 first before they get an e5, and this is also kind of tricky. But as you can see, actually not that many people, like e5 is only played 10% of the time here. Most people, even if they play d5, they're going to follow up with something like this or like that, right? And they're just going to try and develop the pieces, because it's a little bit scary if you've never studied this before. It's like sort of lunge out in the center. It feels like your pawns might be a bit loose, and they are to some extent, which is why people, especially if they don't know the specific move order with g3, right, that we're showing in this video, can sort of be a little bit difficult to play. It's also possible they might go like d5, c5, and then they'll take right and they'll get something similar to the game, and then knight c6, c4, again, has sort of happened. And this is like a very difficult position to really play already. Bishop c5 is probably best, or maybe bishop e7, something like that. If they take, a lot of people do this, but then like you just get a lot of pressure against their center. And let's say if they take at this point, this is really just a dream Catalan again, because look at our bishop on this diagonal. It's not so easy for them to activate this, and our pieces are really just roaring. So castles d5, c4, bishop c5, knight to b3. If you want to take, you can do this as well, but you want to make sure not to release attention too quickly there. You sort of want to play like for rook d1, b3, and like for e4 break eventually, and sort of play like that. But I think knight b3 is a little bit more ambitious, let's say. I'm actually curious to see what the engine says. So I see a lot of people in the Lichess database taken immediately, but as I mentioned earlier, right, like if they play something like this, I was not the biggest fan. I guess you can do this, and apparently we still have some advantage, but the majority of people are actually taking with the pawn, which I think is a little bit inferior. But again, like if this does happen, there's some people in the database you can see going bishop takes d5, but then that loses a bit of our advantage. Maybe it's still a little bit better, but I think from a practical point of view, it's a little bit unsafe sort of giving this up maybe. So yeah, knight c3, d takes c4, knight d2, and yeah, you can see already knight to here, and apparently knight d4 is also an option, but knight takes e4 seems a lot more natural. And then we get to this position where apparently it's best for them already to give up the pawn, which, yeah, we're not going to be turning down. Rook c8 though, again, as I mentioned, so bishop c6 most popular, but then the issue is if they don't want to just lose a free pawn, then like they have to take, and then structurally speaking, this is like a pretty nice position to have. At the very least, we can pretty safely guarantee that our opponent is not going to be having a very fun time. So yeah, queen to c7 though, I'm pretty sure that was a... Oh, apparently the engine doesn't hate it. Maybe black's position is already kind of bad. I should say if b6, I'm not hugely concerned about this. I feel like a position like this, all our pieces are coming in, maybe knight e4 coming next. Very unpleasant. Apparently this is the only move to not be significantly worse. But yeah, I feel like after this happened though, like this was just quite clearly very nice. Let's see if I did anything clearly wrong. So bishop e4, kicking the rook out. Bishop to d2. Apparently b3. I was thinking maybe that's slightly annoying. Okay, rook b2 I wasn't seriously considering. And if a4, oh okay, they don't have takes I guess as well, because my bishop is protecting the rook. But okay, yeah, they quickly collapsed, I feel like. Again, knight to f6. Okay, so I didn't want to allow knight to e5, but engine just thinks that I can go b4, and I mean, I guess that's possible, but it feels a little bit loosey-goosey, to be honest. So I thought this was a bit more practical, just sort of now forcing the knight to f6 and not really allowing knight to e5, to be honest. And then if they kick it back, I can bring the bishop to e3 or d2 or whatever I want to put in. Now that like the knight doesn't have as many annoying jumps, maybe it can come to e4, but somehow that feels a little bit wrong. Like if they have these double isolated pawns now, and again we're a pawn up, but okay, they gave us a piece and then we close it out pretty cleanly. Yeah, pretty easy game actually, honestly, and the guy was obviously not that low rated either. So yeah, pretty textbook Catalan win all in all. Let's go on to the next game though. Alrighty, another white game. Let's go on d4. Playing Carl Young here. Let's go knight f3. And okay, we see a very early c6. Let's just go for g3, knight f6. And against a Slav, I don't usually want to develop the bishop too early on. I want to go for this early setup where we play knight c3. So after bishop f5, knight c3, e6, there's this very precise move, knight to h4, which I quite like. And if we have a bishop on g2, sometimes what you want to do in certain lines is be able to, like, for example, this is line d takes c4, knight takes f5 takes. You want to be able to play e3 and actually be able to take the pawn back, which if you've already played bishop g2, you can't do. And there's some other lines similar to that where you actually want to keep the bishop open on this diagonal. So that's just a small bit of theory that I recommend remembering. And also another point, right, like it might still look quite tempting to develop the bishop, but you always have to be mindful of this sort of tension, and I don't really think we should just ignore that and let them win a pawn there. I think that that's quite difficult to win back actually. And I also wouldn't recommend taking and then playing bishop g2, because then I feel like that sort of gives up our space advantage and would probably allow them to equalize. So I'm going to go queen to d3, developing the queen first, which, you know, breaks opening principles, but the concrete elements of the position always matter more. And what we're going to basically get is a sort of Catalan where we get an e4, and they don't sort of have the problem, like the problem light squared bishop on c8 like they do in many typical closed Catalan lines, but nonetheless, we still have the bishop here, which is going to serve as a nice long-term asset, and we are indeed still looking to get an e4 break. But okay, it's going to actually probably feel more like a Caro-Kann, actually, the positions we get after e4 and d takes e4, just by virtue of the fact that, like in the Caro-Kann, right, they very often get this bishop out, and then like, well, on move 3 very early on, the classical variation, they often take, we take back, and then sometimes later we get in the c4 push. And basically that's kind of what we have on the board right now if we play e4. We could also delay that. We could play like b3, bishop b2, or bishop f4. To be honest, I might play like rook d1 just to build up a little bit. Sort of also keep them guessing, right? Like thinking about like Should they be going for some sort of pawn break? Should they take? Just by keeping the tension a little bit longer and not committing to something like e4, it really does keep them guessing and forces them to make some sort of decision, which is not really easy here because they've developed all their pieces more or less. Okay, maybe not their queen and the rooks, they haven't quite moved, but like they've got all their minor pieces developed, they've castled. You know, it is very tempting at this point for them to start like doing something, right? Like maybe they're going to start trying to like take on c4, but I think this helps us because then this gives us a 2-to-1 pawn majority in the center, and it also opens up our bishop on the long diagonal. So I'm not really too concerned about that, you could say. They might also try to go for something like, I don't know, knight b6, but then I don't know, I would play c5, but I might just sort of keep the tension, go b3. I should note I wouldn't want to take again on d5, because one thing you should note is that like we want to get in the e4 break, but if we're to like go takes and then e4, then after takes we get this IQP, which I just don't think works so well in the structure. Whereas if we go e4 immediately and they take, that's obviously not an IQP, and instead we just have a nice like space advantage, right? So you always have to be keeping in mind your pawn breaks, right? Because if you go takes, the point is because you get an IQP after e4 takes, that just makes it more difficult to achieve a pawn break in general. So yeah, usually unless you like their pawns back here and they have b6 on the board like we see in some Catalan positions, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to go for like c takes d5. It just helps improve their structure, quite frankly. So rook e8 though, this is the kind of move I would be expecting from them. They're not so sure about kind of what to do. They're just sort of sitting for a bit. Bishop f4, maybe keep them guessing a little bit, although to be honest at this point I'm thinking just like going e4. I can't see anything wrong with it. So I'll just play it, and we finally get this position. Bishop takes e4. One idea we can think about it long term is maybe h4 and h5. I think that is a pretty interesting idea. I'm going to put my bishop on f3 just to keep an eye out for that. And also I can put my king on g2 because my bishop is here. And then maybe sometimes the rook can even come around perhaps and help support a break like h5. But we are getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. Queen to c7. Yeah, so I've talked about this in many other videos on the Catalan. Maybe not this one, but c5 is a very typical idea in this sort of closed Catalan structure. But because they've got their light squared bishop out and it's been exchanged off, I don't really think we want to play c5 because we could, but then like it's sort of, there's not the same purpose to it like there were in other positions where the bishop is still on c8 and it's enclosed in the pawn structure, and sort of makes things difficult for them in terms of activating it. Here it's like not really the same, right? It just gives them the square and like the d5 square, that is. Also, I just want to give a very clear example to really highlight what it is I was talking about just then. This is a game that one of my students had from an over-the-board tournament. The opening went quite well, and at this point he did play the c5 move to really shut in the light squared bishop before his opponent managed to play c5 and liberate it. And while again c5 does give up control of the d5 square, because their light squared bishop is sort of still stuck inside the pawn chain, so to speak, there is a much greater justification for playing a move like c5 because of how effectively it can essentially rule this bishop out of the game. Whereas in situations where the bishop has already been developed outside the pawn chain, c5 doesn't really shut it inside, and you're basically just giving yourself a weakened d5 square for, well, I don't want to say no reason, sometimes it still can work, but it's usually just nowhere near as strong as these positions in the closed Catalan, where the bishop is straddled on the b7 square. And I don't see like a tangible benefit to it. And also, like, we're not as concerned about them going c5 now because we already have the bishop here. Again, like, this bishop was traded for a knight of ours, so it's actually kind of helping us in some way if they play c5 and they try to open the position for our bishops. We're going to definitely welcome that. Also, bishop f4 is something I should note. It was the very first move that came to mind. And then bishop d6. Because we have the bishop here, this trade is not really something we're interested in because we want to keep both bishops on the board if possible. Usually that's how you want to handle the bishop here. So I am slightly curious about like this bishop d6 and then bishop g5 maybe. But okay, for now I think I'm just gonna put the bishop here on the e3 square. If they go rook a d8, I think I'm probably just gonna like get off the diagonal with like, sorry, the file rather, with like queen c3. Maybe queen to c2 as well is like something that you could be thinking about, but yeah, let's go queen to c3. I kind of like this, just simple chess, and probably follow up with slow improving moves like king g2, h4, and start expanding on sort of all sides of the board. Okay, b6 looks wrong because now they weaken this, and maybe they're trying to go rook a8 c5, maybe, but I don't know. I feel a little bit. I'm really surprised they did this, to be honest. If you couldn't tell already. So like there's no clear way I can directly make use of this weakness, so to be honest, I'm not going to try and go out of my way too much to try and like exploit that or anything, I think. But if they do go for c5 at some point, I think now d5 is quite a bit more appealing, and we create a passed pawn. Even if they, well, first of all, they'd probably play rook a8, right? But then still, I think this is kind of more appealing maybe after they've played b6. I don't know, maybe it's the same even with the pawn back there, to be honest. But for some reason I'm thinking more about like d5 now with the pawn on b6, whereas when the pawn was on b7 I was thinking more about just exchanging it and opening stuff up. But to be honest, probably also an idea there as well. But yeah, I don't know what their follow-up is. Maybe rook a8 is probably the most logical one, right? But yeah, they're clearly thinking, so okay, they play this move. I kind of want to go for h4. I can also consider b4 as well to try and like maybe hamper this a little bit, and let's say then what would be forced is maybe like takes and b5, and actually that would look quite nice. I kind of like the idea of that, so I'm gonna go b4. I don't see any way they can clearly take advantage of that. If they go a5, I think a4. And again, takes c5, we're going to go take b5. And in that case, we actually get a passed pawn. But yeah, in general, c5, I think now is a little bit more difficult for them to achieve. And yeah, in general, it's like, okay, we don't have a clear, like, crushing attack, but we just have a very pleasant position. There's not really much risk we have to take. And they're sort of stuck in this little box of like wondering what to do, right? And that's again largely because we have the bishop here, and it really does restrict them in a lot of ways having this. But okay, bishop to d6, not too sure what that does. Oh, maybe they're trying to prepare that. Okay, fair enough. So c5 is something I'm thinking about slightly more now, but still I'm not too keen on it. Okay, let's just go rook ac1 for now. Bring the rook over this way. If they do go e5, at the very least we can just go take, and oh, they're going for that. Okay. Okay, so c5, again, something that we considering, especially because now with the pawn, as opposed to it being on b7, we are sort of fixing the c6 pawn as a weakness as well. But okay, obviously there's knight d5 getting in the way of that, so it's not that trivial. But like, man, like c5 here, take, and then bishop c6. Oh, well, actually, then they get knight d5 very quickly. I was thinking if we could consolidate, that would be okay, but then they use the pin and they get the d5 pawn, I think. So that doesn't quite work. Sorry, I think I meant the b4 pawn. So let's just go a3, I think. If they go a5, I think then c5 is more of a legitimate idea, because they're sort of forced to... Okay, I'm a bit surprised they're actually going for that. Yeah, okay, so let's go for c5. If they take, then we take first, and we win material, so not really possible for them to do that. And if they put the bishop on c7 in general, they always have to grapple with just losing the c6 pawn. So yeah, quite a few issues. I was thinking just then, so like bishop c7, let's just say we take, they take on g3, trying to like create this covered attack here. We take back. What the... No, that just loses on the spot, right? Man, okay. He's not playing immediately, so I think he just overlooked the fact that we're winning a piece after all this. But yeah, I was thinking like bishop c7, like takes, and then maybe b5 at the end of all that. And then we force for a pass, protect the pawn, and that could be quite nice, even though we give up our light squared bishop. But okay, this is completely winning, so let's take. We welcome an exchange of queens, obviously, and yeah, I don't know, weird what's happening here, but looks like he was under our Catalan spell, I must say. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, it's pretty clean up until this point. We just played all the right moves, and he only has one pawn really at this point for the piece, so definitely not enough compensation. If he avoids the exchange, we can just come around with rook b1 and try to claim this guy. And okay, that is he just committing suicide at this point? I don't understand what's going on. So d takes c5, and this is protected. This is protected. I think he just might hate himself. So let's go take, and then we run this guy down the board, piece up, and should be pretty trivial. Okay, first of all, maybe just plant this guy behind the pawn. We run it up. If they try to block us, we just go boom and then boom. Okay, we'll snatch that guy up, b5, and we get the pawns rolling. Yeah, let's go here. Okay, b7, and then no way they can stop us. Or we go this way just to appear cool. Okay, and he resigns. And yeah, so let's just see kind of how things happened. So knight h4 and bishop g6. I think if you check the database, pretty much most levels on Lee chess is the most common move. Have just this raid range, and yeah, you can see bishop g6 most common. It's probably the easiest one to face as well though, which is quite fortunate, you could say. And the point is, we just gain the bishop pair. Bishop g2, and as I mentioned, right, you want to make sure to go bishop g2, sorry, delay bishop g2. This is what most people play, but it doesn't allow d takes c4, which I don't know, apparently like you go e3 and queen e2. I guess most people aren't playing that, they're going e4. And to be honest, I don't really like this. Like knight bd7, e5 sort of feels like we're not coordinating that well. So yeah, most people they get to the sort of right position almost, but then they don't exactly execute it correctly. Castles, rook d1. And okay, apparently a lot of people are just going like b3 and building up. Curious what the people in the masters database do. Okay, people usually delay e4. Okay, so rook d1, rook e8, and they go like b3. Okay, let's see this game. So what did this guy do? He went b3, bishop f4. And okay, he just kept the tension until his opponent got fed up and started opening stuff up for him. Fair enough, I don't think there's anything that wrong with e4 as well though. So we just continued improving our pieces. King g2, b4. And yeah, as I was saying, right, if they go c5, then they sort of just help us develop this sort of queenside pawn majority. I did sort of forget to consider b5. That's actually, it's a very typical move in a lot of Caro-Kann positions. I'm surprised I didn't consider it, but the point is, right, if we go like c5 or something, then they get the knight onto this juicy d5 square, and they're probably not doing too badly here. The engine still gives a small plus, but from a practical perspective, I kind of like that already. So maybe I should have just like, maybe a4 makes a bit of sense. And if they go a5, then it's kind of, they do weaken a lot of squares as well by doing that, so they kind of have to be a little bit careful in doing that, I guess is what I want to say. But okay, they didn't do that, and then like c5 apparently strong, but yeah, after this we got a quite nice position. They bonded a piece and not much they could have done. Alrighty, off we go. 1d4, and okay, we see a Dutch. Let's go for g3. The Catalan set up against the Dutch, actually, I think it was actually the main line, so this is all pretty normal so far. Knight f3, we could go c4, but sometimes if you go c4, you allow some bishop b4 check stuff. But yeah, in general, there's a few different subs that black has. Either they're going to go for sort of the Stonewall, or at least when they're committed to the e6 move, they're either going to go for probably like a classical with bishop e7, d6, or they're going to go for a Stonewall with d5. But okay, this is castle. And earlier, before they even play e6, they can also play g6, and they can play in more of what we'd call the Leningrad fashion. If we have to do a mini tier list in terms of like how strong are each of these lines, I would say the classical is like kind of garbage. It's like F tier. Leningrad is sort of like A, and the Stonewall is probably also A, I would say. But okay, we're seeing here bishop e7. More typically, the way that you sort of handle this position is you put the bishop on d6, but sometimes there are ideas of putting the bishop on e7 as well. There's this one line where you can go like knight to e4. This is a favorite of Richard Rapport, but it doesn't seem like our friend here is going for that. So in this position, there's a few different things that we can do. So in the video, I haven't quite properly explained this, but one of the most important things you should understand about the Stonewall is the dynamic of how white putting all these pawns on light squares affects their pieces, and in particular how this bishop is often like what we'd call a bad bishop, right? Because like it's stuck, and as we'll see, there are some ways you can activate it, but it is definitely a bit of a problem piece that black has to deal with. And on the flip side, because again all their pawns are on light squares, this bishop is their good bishop, and it often is not advisable for black to allow these bishops to be traded off, their dark squared bishop for our one, because then likely what they're going to end up with are just a series of incredibly weak dark squares. One of the most prominent ones being the e5 square. As you see in the game later on, we ended up taking very good control of this post on the board. But anyways, back to the game. For one, you can maybe just go for b3 already, and then try to go with like bishop a3 and exchange off the dark squared bishops. That's certainly a viable option. There's also sometimes you can go for like, for example, I remember the recommendation in like course by Krzysztof Zielecki, his keeper at simple 1d4, he recommended to go for like knight bd2. And by the way, if you don't know the course I'm talking about, he basically recommended this whole approach with d4, knight f3, g3 that I'm sort of talking about in this video. But I do quite a few things differently to what he recommended. But yeah, against this line, I do remember what he talked about was knight bd2 with the idea of going knight to e5, bringing this knight over, bishop f4, and sort of playing in that sort of fashion. Or at times also maybe going for b3, bishop b2 in certain positions as well. But yeah, in this position, somehow I'm very tempted to just go for b3, bishop a3. I can't see anything too wrong with this, so I'm just going to play that, try to exchange off the dark squared bishops. And yeah, because his bishop is on e7, right? Like if it's on d6, usually you can go queen to e7 before we get in bishop a3 to sort of stop that idea. But because his bishop is here, right, he couldn't really do that. But yeah, this is generally a strategically favorable trade. It's not like we're winning after we make this trade or something, but it definitely becomes a little bit more difficult to play black's position, at least from a practical perspective. So I'm going to take that. And okay, so first of all, I kind of want to improve my knight because it's on a3. This is the one drawback of playing bishop to a3, is that you bring your knight out to the side of the board and now it's not that active, right? So usually you would want to think, how can I improve it? Knight to b1, well, to a lot of people, knight c2 is going to look more natural because like this looks more active than b1, but many times you actually do want to bring the knight back to b1 because from there it can go to c3, whereas from c2 it's not exactly obvious where the knight goes. But in this situation, I would say that from c2 the knight can come to e1 and then d3, so it's a very typical maneuver actually, and then control this square. So I kind of like the look of knight c2. There's no like knight c3 ideas you really need to be watching out for. That's pretty harmless. If they just keep developing like knight d7, knight d3, move the queen somewhere, knight d3, eventually we're going to get a knight there, maybe kick their knight out with pawn to f3. And if we can accomplish all of that, I think we'll have a nice strategic advantage because again, we've traded off their dark squared bishop. Another idea they can go for that's quite typical is maybe like bishop d7, bishop e8, bishop h5, activating the light squared bishop in that manner. I think though if they go for that, like then we might just go for a very quick knight e5, f3 maybe even, maybe like knight e1. Let's so okay, first of all, let's say bishop d7, knight e1, bishop e8, knight d3, bishop h5. I think at that moment when they're ready to maybe trade the bishop off, I think then I would consider knight to e5. But actually, even now that I think about it, like, am I really concerned about them taking that? Because then I can take with the e pawn, kick the knight away from e4, and I can use the open file to target a backward e6 pawn. I don't necessarily think that's bad. Actually, I would quite like the look of that. Anyhow though, so knight to e1, as we discussed, is a move we're going to play. I don't see a tactical drawback to that, so I'm just going to play it. And maybe from here, what they're going to do is like b6, bishop b7, quite reasonable. If they try to go for like knight f6, bishop d7 and develop the bishop in that fashion, then the problem with that could be that they're sort of relinquishing control over the e5 square. And then also they have this sort of issue with their knights as well that we'd call like superfluous pieces, where basically if you bring a knight to like f6, right, this knight and this knight, well, this knight on f6 wants to occupy the e4 square, but the knight on e4 is actually occupying the e4 square, and they're kind of stepping on each other's toes, right? Which in some sense makes black's position a little bit annoying, and would mean, right, that like you wouldn't just want to play a move like knight back to d2, right, and exchange this knight off, because they actually want that exchange, because then they don't have to worry about which knight occupies e4. They just chop that knight off and then bring the other knight to e4. So you actually want to avoid exchanging this knight in e4. What you'd maybe want to do is just bring this knight to e5 and then kick it out, and then both of their knights would sort of be eyeing the e4 square, but neither of them would actually be able to occupy it, at least after we've played our pawn to f3, right? But sometimes I will note you also have to be a little bit careful as well about playing a move like f3 in some situations, because you do of course shut in your light squared bishop, and you can also leave some weaknesses behind, for example on the e3 square. But yeah, there are many positions where you do want to push pawn to f3, of course. But okay, he ended up going for b6. I was expecting bishop b7, to be honestly. Bishop a6 is a slight surprise, but it's going to keep developing. Rook c1, just protect the pawn. And yeah, perhaps even we could consider something like c takes d5, opening up the file for the rook, but we also do open like diagonal for their bishop, for example, so we'd want to wait for like a good concrete moment to get that in. I was thinking, for example, maybe takes rook c7 after queen to e7, which they actually just played. But yeah, at this very moment, I don't know, I feel like they could easily oppose that with just a very quick rook c8. Maybe not that one, because then rook takes a7, maybe this one, for example, though. I feel like I probably would like to prepare that just a little bit better. So let's first of all go knight to e5, I think. We do have to kind of watch out for something like queen to a3, but I'm not massively concerned about it. Like, first of all, takes. If they take this, then we're going to take. And, well, in general, our knight just occupies a nice square in the center, and probably we can start thinking about, again, f3 very soon. And, of course, after takes, they need to first figure out how they're going to defend the c6 pawn. Exactly, so probably like rook a to c8, I imagine, is what they would do. And to be honest, I don't quite know what I'm going to do yet. Perhaps I could play a move I just thought of as maybe like rook to c2, and maybe I could double up in this sort of fashion. I probably want to double up with the other rook though, so maybe like I move my queen somewhere and then bring the other rook to c1. For example, maybe like rook a c8, rook c2, queen a3. Perhaps there I could play queen c1, takes. I exchange their queen off, and I still have a lot of pressure down the file in this endgame, so that would be quite pleasant. Yeah, like I could play f3, but I, at this moment, sort of feel okay keeping the knight there. I don't want to create too many weaknesses, as I was sort of talking about. Again, I can consider taking, but at this moment, I don't see any clear benefit to be derived from doing that, so I think I'm just going to maybe slowly build up with like rook to c2. And again, as I was talking about, if they try to dive in for the queen or something, then we're going to go queen to c1, and that exchange is probably just going to help us to activate our only piece, which is not really doing much in the game. You could maybe say this queen as well is sort of still a bit inactive on the back rank. But I should also mention, right, if they try to go for something like c5, this is a break in the stone wall, which you always have to be a little bit careful about, because already you're a little bit overextended to some extent, right? But when you go c5, if your pieces are very active and you can sort of dominate the opponent with your piece activity, it can sort of work. But if you're not careful, then it could just lead to like your center sort of collapsing very quickly as well. So don't really trust c5 yet. From black's perspective, you could say. Also, I think one thing they should be careful of is if they play something like rook fd8, then I think probably we can just simply take on d5. And if they take back, probably like with the c pawn, right, then knight to c6, and we're forking the queen and the rook. So they can't exactly play rook fd8 rather. One idea could be to maybe take on c4 and then try to break with c5 and transform the structure a little bit, and try to make use of the fact the queen would be standing in the eye of the rook. This d takes c4 might look a little bit weird, but there are some positions in the Stonewall where you can actually play this by really trying to radically transform the central structure in order to gain some sort of concrete counterplay. But okay, queen to d6, maybe they're just trying to protect that, I'm not too sure. Queen c1 is very much an idea, but are they trying to go c5 maybe with the idea that if we take, then that's hanging? Perhaps that is possible. One weird idea, which you guys might freak out at, is queen to a1. The idea is to just control this indirectly and then basically try to bring this other rook over and again try and put pressure along the c file. It looks a little bit strange, but I can't see anything clearly wrong with it. I probably doubt it's the best move, but it looks at the very least interesting, because like if I go something like queen to c1 and like maneuver my queen over here or something, I don't know, it feels a little bit slow. And also like if I bring my knight back, try to remove it from potentially being loose on the e5 square, I think in that case I actually just run into takes and then simply winning the pawn. And this is something that a lot of people get in the Stonewall. They very rarely actually consider this move d takes c4 because it looks very anti-positional, but it is actually a pretty interesting idea which you should be considering at times. So okay, I'm going to go queen to a1. We'll check afterwards what the engine says about it, but I doubt it's bad. I think white should still be a bit better, but it's probably not by engine standards the top move, I would think. Okay, so rook fd8. They're trying to probably prepare this perhaps. I kind of want to play this, but again, I don't know how to meet d takes e4, so I'm thinking e3 probably is what I'll play. Yeah, okay, let's do this. Thing now is that if they go c5, I can't take on d5. At least it doesn't look like it, because they can take unless I have some sort of like weird intermediate move, but it doesn't really look like it, to be honest. So probably after c5 I'll just keep the tension, like rook d1 or rook c1, continue trying to apply pressure somehow. But yeah, I think that still white has a bit of an advantage. And like, yeah, if black doesn't go for c5, it's kind of difficult to see what their plan is, right? Because they've got all their pieces into place now, but they sort of need to do something with it. Like, are they just going to dick around and play like bishop b7, right? Like, probably not. So I feel like c5 is probably what they're thinking right now. And to be honest, their pieces are decently positioned. They're, objectively speaking, a little bit more active than ours. What we're really playing off of though is the fact that structurally maybe we're a little bit better. So d takes c5 I'm really thinking about. Like before they're able to take maybe. So yeah, I kind of like takes, and if they take back the pawn, for example, I can play rook d1, and then there's actually a decent amount of pressure on this guy here. So I kind of like the look of that. If they take this one, then maybe we get rook to c1 very quickly. We can put pressure along this sort of avenue. So okay, I'm just going to take. And again, this is possible because our queen's protecting the knight there. Maybe rook takes c5 is what they're going to do. That looks kind of alright. Yeah, rook takes c5. That's probably best now that I think of it. Because like queen takes c5, you're sort of a little bit awkward putting your queen in the other rook like this. Pawn takes rook d1 again. As I mentioned, probably not so great. Knight takes d5, rook d1 again. There's a lot of pressure along here. But this one, I guess maybe I still go rook d1 is probably what I'm gunning for. But okay, he goes for this one. I was thinking that I would play rook to c1 in this position, unless I can see a clear reason not to. But yeah, I'm just going to go for this. And yeah, if he takes knight takes c4, I think I'm just a little bit better because like he has this f5. If the pawn was like on f7, maybe it would be closer to equal, but because like he's created some weaknesses with the f5 move and the position's starting to open up a little bit, I do think that I should still have some advantage. As long as I don't like sort of get cooked by any sort of like weird immediate tactics, I do feel like I should still be a bit better, but I could also be completely delusional. So knight takes, so d takes c4 rather than knight takes c4 b5. It's maybe something that I have to consider, which in all honesty I didn't really look at. But okay, really that? And by the way, with this one, point would be that like it's kind of a little bit awkward. I might be losing the two rooks for the queen there, which I'm not sure is that great. I could also sort of keep the tension for a bit though, or like do something else in the meantime, maybe just take the pawn. But yeah, d4, that's a little bit surprising, to be honest. I think I probably just take that. Let's see. So knight d3 is also a candidate move, but okay, I feel like this is sort of just what I should be playing without too much thought. I guess I could also take and then maybe take though, trying to sort of argue that these weaknesses are pretty annoying for him. Oh, but also if I take bishop first, then I also have to think about queen takes e5, and actually I think that's a bit problematic. Okay, let's just keep it simple. Let's just take here. If the pawn, he takes the rook, And let's just bring the knight back. I think that's pretty much the only move. Tucks the rook away, and now maybe queen to e5 is something I should be considering. I feel like the endgame probably I have better chances, just because my structure is a little bit better. So let's go queen to e5. I don't think I am overlooking any tactics. Okay, he goes for that. So he's trying to play for activity in this position. What's this guy's blitz rating, by the way? Out of curiosity. Okay, 1900. I feel like this is slightly better representation of someone's strength than blitz general. Sorry, than rapid rating usually. But okay, let's take I'm thinking knight to e5, but check feels slightly annoying. I'm just watching out for counterplay on this square. I'm not sure how big of a deal that is. Okay, let's just go rook to e1, reposition the rook. Knight d3 is maybe something to be considering. At this point, to be honest, I feel like I've maybe fumbled the advantage. Maybe I still have a slight edge at best, but okay, now I feel like this might be a little bit better. So let's go knight to e5, because now with rook e1, the idea was that I avoided checks, because I didn't want to have to like bring my bishop back to f1. I thought that might be a bit passive. Okay, I think I can just go to e2. I'm not really sure what bishop e4 accomplishes, actually. But yeah, I'm ready to maybe like just take and go f3 and then kick the knight out. King takes g2 and okay, f3. Do I have to worry about like some rook d2 stuff? Maybe. So let's go rook c1. Just to go rook c2 and then maybe kick the knight out. Yeah, but this isn't a very easy game. We'll probably have to analyze that, see what sort of went wrong. But there's still decent chances due to the fact we have this queenside pawn majority, right? So I definitely wouldn't say that they're like completely free of all issues. And in fact, I don't know about that move. Okay, what if we go b4 and just start pushing this guy? Because this is the thing, we do have this queenside pawn majority, right? And it's not necessarily easy to deal with, so... What? Okay, so take... okay. Wait, hold up. Do I have takes b5? I kind of like link with that. It's getting very tactical. c4 take. Oh, I don't have time to figure that out. Okay, takes. But yeah, okay. Knight e4, this is probably a draw, unfortunately. Well, actually, it's still not clear, like, because we do have this outside pass pawn. Okay, king d4. Okay, I feel like we're making progress here actually, because again, with outside pass pawn, it's not so simple. King c5 maybe, because they do say that like knight endgames are sort of like pawn endgames when it comes to revaluation, and generally in pawn endgames, this would be winning if the knights were off because we had the outside pass pawn. Oh, what the hell? Okay, now this is just winning. Talk about timing, right? Because yeah, they have to sort of deal with all that stuff. And then these guys are going to fall like dominoes. So yeah, that was a tough game. Wait, hold up. I'm not messing this up, am I? Oh no, did I speak too soon? Oh no, I think I fucked up. Oh fuck. Okay, so I'm a little bit stupid. I wasn't thinking at the end properly, but yeah, this was winning as I was saying, but I just I was very careless, and I should have gone h4 first. Prevent g5. I just completely forgot about them also racing the pawns down, which is pretty stupid mistake, but okay. Well, let's briefly check out though what happened in the game. So this sort of feels like we have a slight advantage, as I was saying. Rook to c1, knight to e5, all pretty good so far. But yeah, interesting thing the engine points out, the c5 move. A very common idea in a lot of closed Catalan positions, and also in the Stonewall can definitely be a theme as well. I guess the point is if they take probably, yeah, we take on e4, and then we basically get this bind on the dark squares. Okay, we got the light squared bishop, but because the position is more closed, it's not really as important of a factor, and especially this backward c pawn is really going to hurt them. So rook c2 though I think was also reasonable. Again, the engine wants to go for takes c5, establish that dark squared bind. That's a very interesting idea. I'll remember that for next time. But yeah, okay, d4. I was expecting d takes c4 to be honest, and then like maybe b5 even. But okay, engine doesn't like b5 so much because I guess in this position we get like an extra pawn. Within now pieces are very active, and their bishop is also temporarily shut in, which probably plays into the evaluation as well. But after this I thought like maybe we have a slight edge, but they do have piece activity, so from a structure point of view we're sort of doing a little bit better, but because their pieces are active I guess it balances out. And yeah, here I had to sort of be vigilant of like rook d2, so I sort of wanted to counter that. And at this point they sort of started messing around a little bit, and then they sort of had to, like, I guess after this sort of switch modes, instead of trying to like maybe win or something like that, they had to try trade off rooks and make a draw. Knight to e5, that's interesting. I guess sort of just keeping these pawns at bay, trying to kick the knight out, and then maybe only then start pushing the pawns. Hard to figure this out when you have less than 10 seconds on the clock. That was probably poor time management on my part. But yeah, like this ended up working out well, and then we were winning all of a sudden, because there were chances in this knight endgame. Because again, as I was saying, knight endgames are sort of like pawn endgames very often, where like for example, as I was just talking about in this position, right, if the knights just come off and you have the outside passed pawn, it's almost always winning, even if it's like an equal number of pawns, because you just distract their king with this one, and then your king runs in, snatches all their pawns, which I was about to do, and then I was just a complete idiot and forgot about their own counterplay, right? And that of course cost us the game. But yeah, we were never really in that much trouble. We definitely didn't make the best use of our advantage at some point, but all in all, like in this game, were we ever really in danger? Maybe we messed it up a little bit later down the line, but out of the opening I would say it was at least pretty resounding success. The rest was my fault. So I also just want to note, right, like when black tries to go for like any sort of Benoni with c5 on move 1 or c5 on move 2, in this position you don't really want to go for g3. If possible, you just want to advance your pawn. And now in the first game, right, we saw e6, g3, c5, but it was a little bit different here because after bishop g2, they already advanced their e-pawn, and they would have to waste another tempo to play e5 and really kick out our knight. Well, first of all, they'd probably go d5, then e5, whereas something like c5, g3, like takes, d5, bishop g2, e5, like you can see it's just one whole move they spend, not two. But regardless of Benoni, it's one of these few things where we cannot play the Catalan setup against, and we have to adapt our plan a little bit more and just focus on playing principled chess. Alrighty, let's get started. 1d4 and 2 knight f3. Okay, so we see a very quick c5. We're going to go d5 against this one, and yeah, we could go c4, but because we haven't went c4 yet, very often we have this nice idea to just put the knight on c3 and go for more of like this old Benoni setup. Well, technically it's black who's played the old Benoni, but when they play the old Benoni, the drawback is that they do allow white to get the knight here, and sometimes we can even throw in this check as well to make their coordination a bit uncomfortable. Either this or this. We're going to follow up with a4. If they put the bishop there and then like a4, we just take back for the a pawn, the file gets opened for our rook. But yeah, basically the point is if they put the knight here as well, then that sort of blocks in the bishop, and they have like a bit of tough time coordinating everything properly. And especially like if you look at try and understand what their pawn breaks are, right, like maybe they want to go for e6, but if they try to go for e6, well, now we just go take, and they hang the pawn. So pawn to h6, I'm not too sure what that does. Maybe they're going to play like knight h7, but truthfully, I don't think knight h7 is a particularly harmful idea. We're just going to play rook e1 for now. If they do go knight h7, we'll probably follow up with bishop to f4. If we win bishop f4 immediately, there might be knight h5. Okay, so that's their idea. Maybe. Okay, so let me just... You know, one really tempting thing, so I am thinking maybe if we go h3, knight g5, maybe we can go like knight h2 and just try to trap the bishop in, sorry, the knight in the middle of the board with f4. But actually this might be their idea, so it's a little bit strange. But if we go h3 here and knight h2, I think their idea is actually g5. I think that might be the deep point behind h6. And that's actually quite a typical idea. Now if we go f4, takes, and the idea is that now some of our dark squares white doesn't control as well, so I'm not sure if that's our opponent's idea, but if it is, that is it's quite deep. Even still though, we might be able to go for that, because superficially, while they do control some dark squares, the king side's also quite weak, so I'm not actually sure that's like particularly great for them, you could say. They could also go for like f5 and like f4 knight f7. That's also an idea. Again, I don't know how great that is, but it's not impossible. So okay, I'm just gonna go h3 though. I think this is practically quite a testing idea. And also after this, right, we don't have to, if g5 go f4, we can also build up with something like just bishop to e3. Maybe even g3 f4 is potentially an idea, but I would assume g5 is probably what he is trying to go for. When, yeah, I'm not completely sure whether I want to go for f4 yet, because the thing with f4 is it is inherently weakening our position from a positional perspective. Like, you really want to make sure you have adequate attacking resources before sort of like, okay, because they are weakening their king by sort of exchanging off that g pawn in front of it, but at the same time they have really good control of the dark squares after, like, they go, I don't know, let's say takes, so g5 f4 takes, bishop takes f4. If they go like knight g6, slam a bishop onto e5, something like that. But okay, he's doing none of that, quite frankly, and that looks not good. Like, what's stopping me from going f4? Okay, I'm just gonna go for f4. Yeah, I thought. So, okay, it looks like they... I thought they were thinking, like, really deep with this h6 idea, but it looks like they weren't as sophisticated as I may have thought. e5 looks pretty natural. And yeah, so you can consider e6 maybe, or just knight to f3 and keep them really suffocated. It's not really a whole lot of good things to say about their position. To be honest, e6 looks very tempting. That would really just tear apart their position entirely if we achieve that under good circumstances, I think. Like take, they move the knight somewhere, and then like maybe we even come around with the bishop and start targeting that pawn, for instance. Although maybe they get like bishop f5 after the end of all that. We can't forget that that's a possibility. So okay, I'm just gonna activate the knight back into the game for now, bring all the pieces in before really committing to a break. And the tension's also unpleasant for our opponent as well. They're like sort of like not completely sure what it is we're going to do. If they go like knight c7, then bishop d4 I think is probably a sensible way to continue. And yeah, all their pieces are really kind of stuck on these back two ranks of the board, right? Whereas we have a lot of space and it's not so simple for them to kind of figure things out. But okay, queen c7, they're applying more pressure to this pawn. I will note that even if they go take, like let's say they get everything they want, even at the end of that, we might get bishop takes h6, right? And I'm not sure if that's like necessarily all these exchanges have helped black. They very well may have, just because of how little space they have. And generally, the side who has less space wants to try and make those exchanges. So like from that perspective, even though like, okay, they lose this important pawn in front of their king's shelter, they might actually be somewhat liberated still by all the exchanges being made. So from that perspective, something like queen to e2 feels very logical. I could also go e6 again. And actually here in particular, if like take, maybe in some lines I even get a knight onto like d5, for example. And that could be potentially quite unpleasant for them. Also, I just realized in another line was I was mentioning something about bishop f5. I forget whether, so like e6 for example, knight f6, that would only happen if I take though, and then I bring the bishop back. If I go like e6 and I keep the tension, then that might be a bit more challenging. So yeah, let's just go for that. Feels like kind of the right thing to do. And also now because their queen's occupying the square, like if their knight goes to f6, right, that's a bit of a problem for them because like where does this knight go, right? Like it has pretty much no squares that it can occupy at this point. But I'm thinking the bishop goes to, well, actually knight h4 is also quite tempting because if they go king h7, I might just be able to take that, and if takes bishop d3 check, and like that's almost mate. So I'm very tempted by this. You could also say we could just go here, and then there. It's fair enough. Somehow this also looks quite appealing, knight h4, and I don't really see how they can defend against that threat, to be honest. So yeah, let's go for it. Knight h4, and you don't really see any clear drawbacks behind this. If they go a6, we probably just bring the bishop back, and again they still can't defend this. So yeah, pretty much I think losing at this point for Yeonma123, who also has a blitz rating apparently of 2100. So clearly pretty decent player, but yeah. Well, this game we didn't quite get a Catalan on the board because they went very early c5, and like in this position g3 you don't really want to go for, unlike some of the other positions, because like I'll explain it a little bit later I think. But okay, a6 for now, bishop d3. I don't see how they're dealing with this really, but like in this position, right, you go g3. If the pawn is on d5, like say like, okay, again I'll probably just have to explain this after the game, but yeah, do we not just take that? Okay, I get it, you have a cute little check on c5, but I don't think that exactly accomplishes much. Queen can't go anywhere along the 5th rank. Maybe you go queen b6 check and then try to say that you grabbed our little b2 pawn. Congratulations. But after like bishop d4, right? Like, I mean, the queen is borderline, almost trapped, it feels like. And all their pieces are still suffering from just being in a terribly passive situation. So I don't think that necessarily helps them. So yeah, next maybe f5, knight f5, a check. Too many options really to choose from. And I don't know what our opponent is going to do. So, okay, bishop e3. As I mentioned, if they go to b4, we probably just go bishop d4. Maybe we couldn't even throw on a check first. Okay, let's just go bishop d4. We're not concerned if he takes this. I think just like knight d5 is quite strong in that position. I think their queen is actually trapped if they take that, because our knight's covering b4. Then yeah, they probably have to take, and I don't think the knight has any dangerous discoveries. Like, okay, they can take and then we take back and they, oh my god, they win our rook, right? But like, I mean, come on, right? They've already lost their queen. That can't be good. And they also give up this bishop, which is a pretty important defender of the king. So I just don't see that going anywhere for them. And so b6, sure, that feels quite slow, but I guess that's a legal move. It's knight e2, like almost trapping. I guess they have takes. Okay, let's just go knight f5. I like, look at this, right? This can't be surviving for them. So okay, rook a7. That's it's a sign of desperation. So yeah, I think we can. Do we take though? Maybe give a check first. Man, there's too many good options to choose from. I guess that's a good problem to be having. But okay, let's just finally go for a check. If they don't give up the exchange, I mean, I think they're pretty cooked. But if they don't, if they play, okay, yeah, they do that, king there, and their pieces do get a little bit sort of loosened up here, which is sort of good for them, but at the same time, they're also down a fair bit of material, so let's just take that. If they take with the knight, then I am considering like takes and like just knight d5, or maybe just something like queen to e2, queen f3 first, and then preparing that. Regardless, this looks like a pretty good position. So yeah, if he takes the king, obviously that's losing the queen. If he takes the pawn, then that looks bad, but I can't see a win because of knight d5 that does come with check. Oh wait, I can just go a5. I think actually that looks quite nice. So there's two ideas. One is like rook a4, and okay, they can take b2, but we're almost trapping the queen. But the other is that they just can't push or take. And look at the pin along there, right? So a5, yeah, it looks like it's just blasting apart their position. Really took me a while, because to be honest, like okay, we can exchange, and exchanging pieces down is generally decent when you're up material, but like I just felt that there should be something a bit more like crushing, and I do feel like by giving this bishop up, I also allow a bit more counterplay, so I wasn't too fond of that as well. Okay, but this, however, yeah, I think we just take this. We could also take, and again there's a check. This time they can't block it with something on e6, so that's a bit more tempting, but I still don't think it's like quite the effect I would like, you could say. Can I trap his queen somehow with like rook a4? He'd be forced to take, And yeah, I don't know, I can't see it. I think I'm just gonna take this. Force him to go like rook b7, and then should have something probably good in the position. Maybe just knight d5 for starters. Yeah, okay, let's go knight to d5. Okay, we just take that back. And compared to like some of the other lines, right, because we still have this bishop on the board, they don't have a lot of these like annoying checks on this diagonal. If they want them, they have to sack the exchange, which if they do, I'm pretty confident it's just gonna be like completely hopeless. But yeah, if they go e6 now, blocking the check, queen e6 seems pretty strong. Hitting the bishop, I don't exactly see how they can defend that. Maybe knight to e7, but yeah, it seems quite passive to say the least, so maybe just bring queen back to e4, force knight f5. Maybe they go like g4 even, although I could be getting a little bit too excited there. I have to be watching out that I'm not weakening my king like too much, but that could potentially be quite strong. I guess I could also after knight e7 go queen to f3 and try to like come around this side of a check. That actually looks quite strong now that I think of it. And yeah, okay, I'll probably go for that. e6 comes on the board. I don't really see what else they do, like king g7 maybe, but then I think probably g4 there is quite tempting. And okay, so I'll just shut up. Let's go, unless this is blundering something. I think queen to c6. Let's just throw in the bishop, and rook b8, that hangs out. If they go bishop d7, that hangs a rook. Knight e7, I think it's the more or less only move, attacking the queen and defending the bishop. But then yeah, my plan is to just come back, making use of the fact that knight's a bit more passive here. And now I have a new threat of queen to h5. So let's do this. And we can also maybe even consider like f5. Trying to blast open the position as well, because if they take it out the pawn, then like, well, their structure is ruined, and also they open our rook. And if they take the knight, then we get g4 and we win the piece back. So like, in addition to queen h5, playing pawn to f5, just ripping open the position is also possible. And you might notice, right, like a lot of people, they say like when you're up material, like you just want to try and trade pieces, but I really think in this position, like maybe we could do that, but it's kind of difficult as well, right? Like opposite card bishops, not easy to trade those guys. Their pieces are sort of in weird places. But moreover, like their king is weak. We have this extra material. Oftentimes the best way to actually win in these sorts of positions is just use your material advantage to like overwhelm your opponent and just try to like, you know, destroy their king, right? And like, okay, if you're like 900 or something maybe, and like you just want to make sure you get the win, like okay, but I think on this channel I'm mainly talking to players who are sort of above that rating range to begin with. So for those sort of people, I find that they rely too much on this heuristic of like just trade as many pieces as possible, and sometimes they don't actually try to just like completely wipe their opponent off the board. Definitely when I was younger, I made that mistake sometimes of not trying to just go for the kill, and it definitely cost me some games. But anyways, we can go for a check maybe. Rook a d1 is also quite tempting. Yeah, okay, let's go for this one. I'm not concerned about them taking that pawn really. Maybe although they actually do get this defensive resource, which I missed at first sight. But I guess we could have also just taken that, which they just defended against. But okay, now I'm going queen to h5. f5 is also possible maybe. But yeah, let's just go for the check for now. If they go for that, probably f5 is quite reasonable there, or bishop d4 then f5. If they run into this one, then we get a fork. That's one of the ideas of rook a d1. And yeah, really, you can just see here how our material advantage is pretty much overwhelming black. If they, I also just noticed, but because their rook is blocking this now, if they try to go backwards somewhere like there, we probably have some sort of queen e8 if king g8, but also you can think about maybe just taking this pawn. That one also works, bishop d4 and then taking there also is possible. But in general, because their pieces are all crap and our pieces are pretty good, there's just not much hope for them. Okay, do we go f5? Or do we go bishop d4 first? Bishop d4 maybe takes is annoying because then they control that square. So I kind of want to go for this one. And so that's possible. Then we get queen d5 check. So I'm not too concerned about that. Okay, check. And bishop d4, sorry, king g7, I think bishop d4 looks quite strong. And if like king f8, then we get rook f1, and that looks like an issue for them. Okay, we can also go rook f1 first though. I think that might be even stronger. Yeah, let's go for that. Now for queen e5, definitely bishop d4. And they don't even get any of this 95 stuff, which, like, okay, that would have been strong as well, but I'm just kind of trying to go for, like, the absolute most decisive win, especially because I don't have that much time on the clock. But there's increments, so I'd be able to convert fine. But yeah, I kind of just want to finish the game as quickly as possible. Knight to f4, I should also note, I think that probably just runs into queen f3, then they defend, and then bishop d4 again should probably be winning the queen. Maybe they have some weird knight discoveries at the end actually, because the bishop is protecting this, but I don't think that should really be fully saving them, let's say. Okay, queen to g5. Okay, so we could definitely exchange queens and be winning, but like, come on, right? Bishop d4 check. I think that's like even more winning. Maybe they get 95 though actually, but even this I don't think should be saving them. So do we take though, or okay, let's just take that. Okay, queen c5. I might have actually allowed some counterplay here, because takes, and takes is a bit of an annoying option I gave them. Maybe I have queen f8 check first, so that could actually be... Okay, let's give a check. If they go there, that's mate. If they go for this one, okay, wait, so I'm just gonna give a check first, just to buy my time a little bit. Okay, let's take that. Okay, it's a bit of a passive move, but we do what we got to do right now. Yes, we definitely fumbled it a little bit to get into this situation, but should still be quite clearly winning. If they go bishop h3, now they hang this, and if they go pawn to e3, maybe we even just ignore that. Okay, I wasn't expecting that. Let's go rook e2. I think I might have allowed. I don't think I'm giving them perpetual quite, but they're getting very close to it. Oh fuck, maybe they shouldn't be saying that word, should I? I might have given one to them. No, I don't think I quite have. Okay, so I go here, and now I get g3, I think. So that was a bit clumsy, but okay, I have to make sure they're not like mating me now, but not really. Okay, let's give a check. Oh, maybe that would have been quite strong. Okay, can't dwell too much over that. I think that works quite well. E3, G4. I hope that doesn't like... No, that can't work. Rook H2. Yeah, we allow too much counterplay. Let's go Queen F4. Try to exchange queens. Okay. Queen H4 maybe. Let's try this. Okay, I think... No. Okay, he didn't see it. He had takes and bishop h3. I don't know what I'm on right now. Okay, but that's a free pawn. I'm gonna take that. Oh my god, this is getting way messier than I would have liked. Queen b5. He does have that, which is slightly annoying, but after like queen e5, I don't think that's going anywhere. Okay, now we're in. Now we're in. Okay, so this is good. Yeah, that was a really messy conversion. Okay, if he goes bishop g4, we just ignore it. If he goes here, we just go this and pick up the pawn. Okay, that was a really crappy conversion after what should have been a much simpler win. I guess I could have been an argument maybe of trying to trade queens earlier. So maybe what I was saying was complete bullcrap, but I think that's more to do with my time situation. But maybe that's also an argument for trying to be quote-unquote more practical. Yeah, but okay, well, let's see what happened there. Honestly, like from the opening perspective, this was pretty horrendous for our opponent. You can see in general these Benoni sort of positions are already like past point 8 in general. That doesn't mean they're completely terrible. In fact, like you often need to be careful to sort of limit their counterplay, because one interesting thing about Benoni is that in a lot of these King's Indian sort of positions, or maybe Dutches, is that very often for some reason it's like by default like +7, and okay, it's not for some reason, it's like because you have less space, and generally computers tend to favor space quite heavily. But it's quite funny, it's that when you have like a position that goes down to like 0.00 in evaluation, that's often a pretty bad sign already. Even though it might seem like it's equal, it's different to like equal in some sort of like Queen's Gambit, where already to begin with there's a sort of more equal amount of space. Whereas in these ones, it's sort of like, if you think about it, you start here, and then to end up at 0, like, you have to sort of go down. Whereas, like, if you start at 0, it's like, sort of, the equilibrium is sort of just maintained. But because you've already been on a downward trajectory, there's like that inertia that makes it difficult to actually keep the balance, and often it just keeps going below that point, and then you end up in a very troublesome situation. That could be complete bro science, but that's, from what I found, at least, generally true. But okay, yeah, we were talking about g5 here. h4, interestingly, is a top move. I was talking about how this is interesting because, like, from a positional point of view, it does give them the dark squares, but potentially it could be opening up their king side if allowed. Queen h5 is definitely something we'd be curious about. But okay, obviously, on some depth, it seems to be thinking that that's not the best idea, which sort of was what I was thinking as well. Knight e2, knight g3, that's interesting. G4 as well, I quite like the idea of, and then going f4. Okay. Knight f6, so this just allowed us to completely steamroll them. Yeah, of course you don't really want to take, like, that just releases the tension. They get the knight active, maybe they take the pawn as well. No reason at all to do that, just keep the space advantage, right? e6 was timed quite well, and we had a completely winning position, and then, like, I wonder if bishop f7 lost a bit of the advantage, because, like, you know, we do want material, but at the same time, like, we do also open up a lot of their pieces, and yeah, the computer seems to echo that. Like, we're still winning, but it's like we're not as maybe winning as we could be, right? So, I don't know. To be honest, I'm not going to analyze this part too deeply, but I'm curious if we ever fumbled the advantage. Maybe I should generate some sort of computer analysis. Maybe taking on e5, I'm not sure. Okay, apart from one point where I think that's where, like, yeah, we allowed this, as I mentioned, we were apparently winning, but I definitely made things more difficult on myself at some point. Okay, pretty clean graph apart from that, that one thing, but just because the graph says you played well, it doesn't necessarily mean that, you didn't make things more difficult for yourself at certain points, which I think I definitely did. I rook e6. I was considering also rook takes e6 in this position. Probably strong. Okay, but anyways, let's get on to the next game. Alright, but anyways, that was actually the last game for this video. If you want more help for your game of one-on-one coaching though, and between 1500 to 2000 roughly, I have a form in the description below. But that's going to be it for today.